somewhere between the altar and the amplifier, between sacred silence and distortion at full volume, there lives a preacher who never took the pulpit. His name is Jack White. Raised Catholic, almost ordained as a priest, until the guitar started speaking louder than the gospel ever did. But that holy fire never left. It just found a new temple, one built from wax, from wood, and some blown out speakers. This is the story of how Jack White fused faith and fury, how scripture became song, and how every riff still carries a hint of prayer. This is Jack White and the Gospel According to Noise. Hi, I'm Andy Fenstermaker, host of Poetic Wax, a weekly music history series and podcast where I dig into the record collection I've been building since the 1990s to explore the sometimes little-known history of a band, album, or song from within. Jack White's music often sounds like a battle between light and shadow, chaos and control, purity and noise. And that tension can be traced all the way back to the pews of a Detroit church. Born John Anthony Gillis in 1975, Jack was the youngest of 10 children in a deeply Catholic household. His mother worked for the Archdiocese of Detroit, and his father maintained the very building where Mass was held. Catholicism wasn't part of life, it was the fabric of it. Jack served as an altar boy, donning robes, lighting candles, memorizing the rituals of sacred space. He even seriously considered the priesthood, but it was the guitar that snuck into the back door of that calling. He once confessed, "I got accepted into seminary in Wisconsin, and I was going to become a priest. But at the last second, I thought, I'll just go to public school. I had just gotten a new amplifier in my bedroom, and I didn't think I was allowed to take it with me." That moment of realization didn't feel like a rejection of God, but more like a pivot from preaching at the pulpit to preaching through distortion. And yet the liturgical mindset never really left him. In fact, it may have informed literally everything that came after. To understand Jack White's musical DNA, you have to look backwards, through the smoke and sparks of Detroit's rock scene, past the angular blues of Mississippi Delta, and into the heart of American folk music, gospel, and country blues. White has long cited Son House as one of his most formative influences. The haunting sermon-like delivery of House's grinning in your face affected Jack in a way that scripture never had. It wasn't just music, it was testimony. Jack once said that song taught me you don't need anything but your voice and your hands to move someone. That's music in its purest, holiest form. Beyond House, he found salvation in Roscoe Holcomb, Mavis Staples, Wanda Jackson, artists who blurred the lines between the secular and the sacred, turning life's pain into rhythmic confessionals. And Jack didn't just absorb these influences, he amplified them. With Third Man Records, he resurrected the legacy of artists like Blind Willie McTell, Mississippi Sheiks, and Charlie Patton, pressing their voices to vinyl and preserving them in analog amber. Through Third Man, Jack became something of a cultural priest himself, curating, conserving, and celebrating the voices that shaped his faith in music. As we'll see later, this reverence for raw, emotive, soul-bearing sound becomes the bedrock of his own albums, especially Get Behind Me, Satan. By 2005, Jack White had become a reluctant rock icon. After the explosive success of Elephant, the White Stripes were no longer this cult secret. They were global. MTV, tabloid press, festival headliners. And Jack, always a bit allergic to fame, was cracking under the weight of visibility. It was in this crucible that Get Behind Me, Satan was born. The title, as Jack explained, is a direct reference to Matthew 16:23, where Christ rebukes Peter. "Get behind me, Satan, you are a stumbling block to me. You do not have in mind the concerns of God, but merely human concerns." This verse is not just a scolding. It's about temptation, identity, and clarity of mission. Jesus isn't calling Peter Satan in the literal sense. but rather identifying the human ego as an obstacle to the divine path. Jack used this framework to challenge the growing cult of personality around him, a spiritual rejection of false idols of fame. Musically, it marked a major departure. Gone were the dense, bluesy riffs of earlier albums. In their place, marimbas, pianos, acoustic guitars. It was spare, odd, almost theatrical, like a liturgy performed in a haunted theater. And within it, three key themes emerge. Number one, temptation and false idols. In Take, 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 Jack encounters a celebrity in a hotel and descends into obsession. What begins as admiration becomes grotesque entitlement. That song is a parable, how quickly reverence becomes idolatry, and how society cannibalizes those we exalt. Number two, prophecy and wrath. Red Rain is apocalyptic in tone. Its title evokes divine retribution, but its lyrics are cryptic and menacing. The storm in the song could be internal, emotional, or maybe even something larger. God's judgment raining down. It plays like a modern book of Revelation. And then there's number three, Deceit and the Serpent. In The Nurse, the marimba dances a deceptive rhythm as the lyrics spiral into violence. It reads almost like Proverbs, a warning against trusting appearances. The nurse, the caretaker, becomes the predator. Deception is a theme straight from Genesis. Critically, the album was polarizing. Some fans wanted more distortion, more riffage, but for Jack, this album was necessary. A rejection of the golden calf, a recalibration of purpose. In a poem titled Music is Sacred, published on Third Man Records blog, he emphasized the sanctity of music and urges listeners to protect its soul. Those of you who stand for the sanctity of music so that its soul can breathe and be heard, shout it out loud with whatever microphone you have, or these stones will shout for you. You can't talk about Jack White without talking about color. Color has always played a symbolic role in White's universe. With the white stripes, the red, white, and black palette became very iconic, but it wasn't random. Those colors represent the most powerful emotions. Red for passion and anger, white for purity, black for death or the unknown. It was a visual theology, a holy trinity of tones, if you will. But Jack's musical identities multiplied, and so did his colors. With the raconteurs, deep greens and browns began to dominate, earthier tones. It reflected the band's southern gothic sound, like moss-covered hymns from a backwoods chapel. As a solo artist, Jack chose blue. For Blunderbuss, it dons a cold, cerebral palette, aligning with themes of loneliness, estrangement, control. Themes of confession and punishment run throughout this album, with tracks like Hypocritical Kiss and Freedom at 21 framing love and betrayal through the lens of sin and consequence, almost like personal psalms of guilt and karmic justice. Lazaretto deepened that blue, touching on ideas of exile and self-imposed quarantine, both spiritual and emotional. And named after leper quarantine stations, the album grapples with exile, isolation, and spiritual contamination, portraying Jack as a self-imposed outcast wrestling with the duality of pride and penance. With Boarding House Reach, the blue went almost kaleidoscopic, mirroring Jack's manic blend of genres and spiritual searching. It was as if he was painting a stained glass window, shard by shard. The Catholic gospel of genre and form, this album evokes cosmic spirituality, with tracks like Connected by Love evoking divine longing and over looping like a religious chant locked in purgatory. With 2022's Entering Heaven Alive, we return to a sort of muted, faded blue-gray, a softer, more reflective light. The kind of color you find in an old Bible or the robes of an aging priest. Stripped down and reverent, this album feels like a folk hymnal, addressing mortality, humility, and redemption with tenderness. Especially in songs like If I Die Tomorrow and A Tip from You to Me. 2022 saw a second release with Fear of the Dawn. Bathed in electric blue and stark white, the album's palette evokes cosmic energy and spiritual awakening, reflecting its themes of chaos, experimentation, and a restless search for transcendence in the modern world. This electric night-side twin to Entering Heaven Alive explores spiritual anxiety and apocalyptic vision, using mythic language and fragmented mysticism to depict a world caught between enlightenment and oblivion. On his most recent release, No Name, you can't escape the deep blue hues. Religion resurfaces with symbolic depth, especially in Archbishop Harold Holmes, where Jack constructs a surgical sermon about authority, hypocrisy, and the blurred lines between sacred and profane leadership. I'll get to this more in a moment. No Name suggests a richness layered over decay, mirroring the album's exploration of faded authority, sacred disillusionment, and fractured identity. The evolution of color isn't just aesthetic, it's theoretical. Each project is a new season, each with its own religious underpinning. Pausing for a quick moment of self-promotion, Poetic Wax can be found on YouTube, on your favorite podcast platforms, on TikTok, and on Substack. I'd love it if you followed me in multiple places in case one of them disappears. You can also join the weekly newsletter where I get a little bit more personal at poeticwaxpodcast.com/join. On to No Name. On No Name, one track stands apart in tone and title. Of course, Archbishop Harold Holmes. It's a strange, tender ode, part satire, part sermon, part homage. There's no real Archbishop Holmes, at least not one that we could verify, but Jack conjures him like a character from a Southern novel, a preacher both real and imagined. The lyrics playfully nod at religious authority. Holmes might be a stand-in for Jack himself, a man trying to lead, to guide, while surrounded by wolves and cynics. Or maybe Holmes is every performer, standing at the pulpit of a stage, trying to give the audience something more than entertainment. There's a sense that the church, like the music industry, is full of contradictions, but still, the work is holy. Throughout his career, Jack revisits these themes. In Connected by Love, he frames human connection as a form of spiritual salvation. In What's Done Is Done, he channels country gospel to contemplate regret and eternal consequence. Even in Jack's instrumental arrangements, you hear echoes of hymns, minor keys, call and response patterns, a preacher's cadence wrapped in fuzz and feedback. So Jack White never became a priest, but he may have done something holier. He took the tension between dogma and chaos, between incense and amplifier, and he made them sing. His music is filled with moral reckoning, ritualistic repetition, and a constant interrogation of truth. Religion for Jack is not about dogma, it's about discipline. It's about asking questions and challenging false prophets, whether they come from pulpits or record labels, or even the government. He doesn't preach certainty, he preaches tension. Music fulfilled my connection to God in a way that would be unfettered by man's interpretation and man's religious ideas. I can become closer to God by understanding the beauty of what I do musically, Jack once said. With that perspective, White never abandoned his faith. He translated it. His records became rituals, his guitar a kind of liturgy, channeling belief through distortion, silence, and sound. In Jack White's world, faith didn't fade. It found a louder instrument. He never needed a caller or a church to preach. Just 6 strings, a microphone, and a world ready for reckoning. Like a prophet with the pedal board, Jack White turned noise into scripture and made believers out of all of us. His altar may be a stage and his gospel distorted, but the message remains. Salvation is still possible if you're willing to listen. So what began as a whisper in the pews became a thunderous sermon in sound, and he's still delivering it one record at a time.